This morning, I had this message brewing in my heart, and my kids, sometimes I'll give them a message, and then the Lord will say, the adults need to hear that too. And I preached a message, the Lord laid one on my heart several weeks ago, and it was the God of the Valley. And the Lord, as I was preaching it to my kids, said, the adults need to hear this too. And when Pastor John asked me when I wanted to preach in March, I said, well, 2 of them are out because I'm going to be in Africa. The next one I'm probably just going to be barely awake in church because I'm going to be jet lagged and on way bigger time difference and all that. So I said, I don't know. And last week the Lord was just really telling me it's next week. And I saw the forecast for the snow and I thought, Satan, you don't want this to happen, but it's going to anyways. And when God said we're not canceling, I don't care. I said, okay. Then God's got a message and I'm ready to give it. But the Lord, I love, because I'm always like, oh man, I'm not against preaching the same message twice, but like I want new, I want fresh manna. I want new. And as I was worshiping earlier, the Lord just kept giving me some new things to add to this. And the first thing that I want to say, we were singing that song, Deep Cries Out. The Lord said to me, He said, Emily, He pointed me to Psalm 42, verse 7, and it says, deep calls to deep, and the roar of the waterfalls, all your waves and breakers have swept over me. Deep calls to deep. And as we were singing that song, the Lord brought my message to my mind, and He said, Emily, He said, you got to walk into the deep even when you don't feel like it.
That's right.
You got to walk into the deep even whenever you're not on the mountaintop and you're in the lowest of valleys. He's calling out to you. And today we're going to talk about the purpose of the valley and why they're important. But the Lord is saying you can't just relax. Because you're in a valley doesn't mean God's not calling you. He's calling you because then you have to trust Him even more. Because when you can't feel His presence or you can't see His hand at work in your life at the moment, that's when you have to trust Him more. And so when He says walk into deeper waters or fall into deeper waters, that's a greater trust. And some of you this morning, God is calling you to trust Him. Because He's calling this morning. I'm telling you right now, I haven't felt the anointing of the Lord so strongly than during worship this morning. I was on my knees. I could not stand in the presence this morning. I was weeping. He's calling you. You're here this morning for a divine purpose. He is calling you to deeper waters this morning. And He says, I don't care where you are. I'm calling you. I'm calling you. And the next thing, we were singing that song, not for a minute. And all I want is all you are. All I want. And as I was on my knees, the Lord said, because the Lord's been dealing with me, and my kids can attest to this, I've been talking about intimacy. Intimacy with God. And that's, Pastor John has been preaching to you guys about that, but the Lord has been telling my kids the same thing. And I told them the other night, I said, guys, when I first started my ministry, I said my prayer was that a generation would be on fire for the Lord. But I said, as I've grown and as I've been in ministry longer, the Lord is telling me to say to you guys, I want a generation that is intimate with me. I want a generation that knows me. I want a generation that's all about me. All about who I am. That's what I want. And so yes, I want generations on fire, but more importantly, I want a generation so in love with their Jesus. So in love with their Jesus that no matter what comes their way, just give me Jesus. Just give me Jesus. That's all I need. And that's all I want. And this morning, God is calling you. And we've heard it the last several weeks. And what the Lord showed me was, I wasn't here for 2 weeks ago, but talking about the hunger. And Pastor John used this scripture in Psalm 42. And in this we see, why are you downcast? This isn't necessarily a super great psalm. I mean, he's desperate. He's crying out. But can I tell you guys something? You're gonna, like, okay, I'm getting ready to go to Africa, right? So I'm not really gonna eat American food necessarily, right? And so where you are in your spiritual walk determines what your hunger is. And so when you're in the valley, you're not going to crave the same things that you do on the mountaintop. And so you've got to eat. You've got to hunger out what is available to you. And so what God is saying is, are you going to feast on this? Because this is what I've given you. Because you're going to desire different things. You ever have cravings? I've never been pregnant, but I know pregnancy cravings is a thing. And when you crave something, you want it, right? You want it. And when you crave Jesus, whatever He puts in front of you, you're going to eat. Yeah. And so this morning He says, I don't care where you are. I just want you to come to me. I'm putting this in front of you. I'm giving you this opportunity. I'm calling you to deeper waters. Are you going to walk? God in the valley. I love this picture. I found it this morning. Mountaintops are for views and inspiration, but fruit is grown in the valleys. Billy Graham. Mountaintops are great. Don't get me wrong. I love those mountaintop feelings. Especially, I love feeling like I'm just on top of the world. Nothing can stop me. The valleys are a little harder, right? Because when we're in the valley, we see the mountains around us. And sometimes we get a little overwhelmed. And then we see the other people that are on top of the mountain. We're like, why can't I be them? And we miss out on what God's wanting to do in the middle. Because we sang that song. We can't go back. And we don't know what the future's going to bring. But here in the middle, you are. Hallelujah. Here in the middle. Here in the valley. I have another quote written down here before I get into the scriptures, and it's, rock bottom will teach you things the mountaintops never will. Rock bottom will teach you things the mountaintops never will. We're not meant to stay on the mountain. We got to go to the valley too. Okay, Ezekiel, I'm going to be in 36 very briefly, and 37 is where we're going to focus on today. But in 36, Ezekiel 36, the header for this chapter is a prophecy to the mountains of Israel. And whenever I was beginning to study this message, I thought, that's interesting. To the mountains. And then after that, in 37, we're going to go to a valley. And so what the Lord showed me was this. In 36, this prophecy, Ezekiel said that Israel would be restored as a nation and would return to its own land. The mountains in this chapter were symbolic of Israel's strength. God would judge, and then He would restore. Now in verse 8, He says, but you, O mountains of Israel, will produce branches and fruit for my people, for they soon will come home, and I am concerned for you, and I will look on you with favor. And then it talks about in verse 10, the towns will be inhabited and the ruins will be rebuilt. Now I'm just pulling out some random stuff here just to kind of give you some stuff. But in verse 11 it says, and I will make you prosper more than before. Now this is the prophecy to Israel, to the mountains of Israel. Now 22 through 29 says this, 36. Therefore say to the house of Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I'm going to do these things, but for the sake of my holy name. You see, we can do things, but that doesn't change God. That doesn't change who God is. Your circumstances don't change who God is. God is still holy. God is still worthy. No matter where you are, God does not change. And He says, which you have profaned among the nations. Verse 23, I will show the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned, and the name you have profaned among them. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord. Amen. Are you going to let God work on you? Because you see, Israel was a mess. But that didn't change what God saw in them. he was still their people. Israel was still God's people. And just because they went through a lot, God is saying, they're going to know that I'm the Lord because I'm about to do something in you guys that there's no other explanation. And God wants to do a work in you. Now when people see you, they say there's only one explanation how they could have come out of this thing. There's only one explanation as to how they could have went through something so horrible or something so tragic. There's only one reason, and it's Jesus. Your testimony is going to be the simple fact that you let God bring you through things. And when you come out of it, God is still the same as when you entered it. For I will take you out of the nations, I will gather you from all countries, bring you back to your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove you, your heart of stone, and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Okay. So we have this prophecy to the nations. And he said, I'm gonna restore you. And he promises, I'm going to rebuild your ruins. You're going to prosper more than you've been before. You're going to bear so much fruit. And he's promising all these things. He's promising all these things. And it's like, okay, this is going to be awesome. Ezekiel's thinking, man, God, I can't wait to watch you move. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with this. And then we jump to 37. And instead of the restoration happening on a mountain, it's going to happen in a valley. He says, Ezekiel, I want you to come with me. And Ezekiel's saying, okay, where are we going? And it says in verse 1, the hand of the Lord was on me. He might be leading you to an unknown place. Or a place that doesn't look like, hey, this is where I should be going. God, we should be staying up there. You're getting ready to do your best work, and that happens on the mountain. That happens on the mountain. We got to stay on the mountain. But he says, the hand of the Lord was on me, and he took me into a valley. You see, sometimes he's going to lead you into a valley, and you're going to say, God, what are you doing? What are you doing? But the hand of the Lord is on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and he set me in the middle of a valley. And it was full of people. No. Bones. This vision, 37, illustrates the promise of 36, new life and a nation restored, both physically and spiritually. God's thinking, Ezekiel, you don't even know what you're in for. You think this restoration is going to be awesome? It's going to be awesome, and it's going to be even better because I'm about to do something crazy. I'm about to do something awesome, and I'm going to take you in this valley, and I'm going to show you all these dead and dry bones. But I want to read this. I want to read to verse 14 because I love this story. I love this story so much. Verse 2, he led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. And he asked me, son of man, can these bones live? I said, O sovereign Lord, you alone know. And then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you, and make flesh come upon you, and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Verse 7, so I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I was prophesying, people, can you imagine the noise? Can you imagine the noise? Whew. There was a noise. There was a rattling sound. Can you imagine? And the bones came together, bone to bone. And I looked. If I was Ezekiel, the tendons and the flesh appeared on him, skin covered them, but there was no breath. And he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, son of man, and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe into the slain, so that they may live. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and breath entered them, and they came to life, and they stood on their feet, a vast army. And then he said to me, son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Talk about restoration. They say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone, and we are cut off. But I want you to prophesy and say to them, this is what I say. This is what I say. Oh, my people. I love that he says, my people. Oh, my people. I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. And then you will be my people, and you will know that I am the Lord. And when I open your graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live. And I will settle in your land. And then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it, declares the Lord. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. Let's go home. What a powerful story. You see, the promise of chapter 36, it didn't come on the mountain, but it came in a valley. God can take the lowest of places of our life and raise us up to be stronger than ever. We look at the mountaintop as our best experiences with God. But sometimes our best things come out of the valley. Because usually the valley represents the low places. But that is when Christ's power is made perfect. Because when we're weak, then we're strong. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm in a low place in my life, in my walk, I don't always feel the strongest. I feel pretty weak. But you see, God tells us, my grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient. And my power, not your power, my power is made perfect in your weakness. And so when we're in the valley, we should be relying and trusting God more to get us through. I want to look at a few things in 37 before I go on to a couple other things. In verse 3, the Lord showed me this as I was preaching it to my kids. He asked me, son of man, can these bones live? And Ezekiel's response, I told the kids, I said, mine probably would have been like, really, God, you're asking me? I don't know. You're the one that brought me here. You tell me. And he says, but only you know. And what the Lord showed me was he had such a reverence for God. It was such an awe. It was, God, only you know. I have no idea if these bones can live. You tell me. But what the Lord showed me this week as I was preparing, the Lord said, Emily, he's asking you, can any good come from this? Can any good come from this valley? And my response should be, God, only you know. Only you know what's going to come out of this. Only you know why I'm in this mess that I feel like it is. Only you know why I'm in this low place. Only you know why I'm walking through this valley right now. Only you know. That should be our response. And God didn't waste time. When he took Ezekiel into this valley, he immediately said, in verse 4, prophesy to these bones. Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. And what this tells me is that God saw the potential. He didn't see bones. He saw the house of Israel. He saw an army. He saw an army. He saw what these people could do. He saw the potential. He saw his original intentions. He didn't see bones that were dead and dry. He saw a strong spiritual army. He saw his people. He called them my people. He saw the potential. He saw the potential that these bones had. Jumping over to 13 or 12, he said, "Oh, my people, I'm going to open your graves, and I'm going to bring you up." When you're down, there's only one way, right? Up. God will take you up, but valley experiences lead you that way. He says, I'm gonna take you up. You got to walk through this first. You got to go through this first because I'm going to show you how powerful I am. I'm going to show you my plan, but we got to take this route first, and then we'll go up. Because when you're low, you can only see what's around you, but when you're up is when you can see what God's doing. Your perspective has changed. When you're down here, all you can see is this, but when you're up, you can see everything. And God's saying, before you can see what I'm doing, I got to take you through some things first. But he says, I'm going to bring you up. And so somebody today needs to hear that. He's going to bring you up. Just keep walking. Just keep walking. People will know you belong to God because of your testimony. People will know God because of what He's done for you. You know, just like Jenny standing up here and telling us some things she's been going through. That was a testimony to the goodness of God. That He has delivered her from those things. People need to hear your story. People need to see what God has done. Psalm 23. Most of you know this song by heart. Verse 4. Even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now the valley of the shadow of death, Ezekiel was in a valley of dead, dry bones, death. But God was there because it says His hand was on me. The term shadow is key because in order for there to be a shadow, there has to be light. Which means that God is with us the entire time. Because God is the light. And so maybe you're walking through something that is very hard for you. Let this be comfort today. That God is with you. That He hasn't just put you in these places and say, figure it out. He says, I'm with you and I'm going to show you something awesome and I'm getting ready to do something big. You just got to trust me. In the darkest and hardest of valleys, God is there. He is walking with you. This means that God can use even your deepest valleys to bring spiritual revival. God can use your deepest and darkest valleys as a place for spiritual revival. After all, the valley is where God took Ezekiel to raise up an army and to fulfill His promise. So don't think that because you were in a valley that God is not at work. I seem to think that it is where God does some of His best work.
That's right.
We rely on God more when we see that He is the only way we're getting through.
Yes.
The only way. to reflect. That even in my worst times, that God is the only way I'm getting through it. As I said, I couldn't even stand and worship. And what the Lord told me was this. He had me get on my knees. And I thought I was down there for me. But He showed me that's a spiritual reference to how some of you feel. That some of you are so overwhelmed with where you are in your life right now, or the things that are going on, or your surroundings, that you're barely hanging on. You're on your knees. You're not laid out, but you're on your knees, and you can go one way or the other. You can either stand or you can either fall. And what the Lord showed me was a picture of the valley. And what does it say? They stood up. They stood up. Don't let the weight of what's going on around you take you down. You stand up under whatever that is, and you keep walking. And I told my kids, the Lord showed me this as I was preaching this, and I wasn't going to go here, but I feel like I'm supposed to. Some of you have pitched a tent in the valley. Some of you have been living in this valley for far too long because you just expected, God brought me here, so I might as well camp out. No. Some of you need to tear down your little tents that you've built, and you need to start walking because God has greater things on the other side of this for you. Some of you have been in this valley for way too long, and God's saying, today, I call you forth, stand up and start walking because I have greater things for you. I have greater things. I have healing for you. I have deliverance for you. I have promises to fulfill, but you're not going to see them as long as you're laid out in this valley. God said, I didn't bring you in this valley. I didn't bring you in this valley for no reason. I led you here so that I can show you things and work on you. It's time to start walking, people. He's calling you from your graves. And He's saying, I'm about to bring you up and do great things in you. Get out of your valley. Some of you have kept yourself there. And you know what? God is faithful, and He says, stand up and start walking, and I'll lead you. I'll lead you. But we got to do our part. But He showed me that. He said, Emily, I was on my knees, and I was weeping. I don't usually cry, but I usually do it in the presence, so that's about it. But that's okay with me. I was weeping on my knees, and as we started singing Here Again, which is the song I really felt in my heart, the Lord said, stand up. Stand up. This morning, for some of you, you got to stand up. You just got to stand. And you got to proclaim these songs. You got to tell God who He is. He loves that. Because then you know that's who He is. And that's even better. But the Lord said, Emily, you got to tell those people, stand up. Because I'm about to do a great work. I'm about to do a good thing. I'm about to bring some spiritual revival in this place. I'm calling dead bones to live again. And the reason I love that song that we sang is because not for a minute. Not for a minute. Was I forsaken. Not for a minute. My question to you today is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in your valley experiences? Some of you might not be there right now. Some of you may be on the mountaintop enjoying the view. Watch out. Don't enjoy too much. Just kidding. Some of you may be in this valley, and some of you may need to hear the prophecy today about you just need to stand up on your feet. Because God's about to do work. And I'm going to say this, and I hope, I pray that this is The Lord has really been working on me with worship. Now, I love to worship. You probably can tell that if you watch me on Sunday mornings. I love worship. Love to worship. But I feel like sometimes we worship God based on how we feel. How we feel should not determine on how we worship our Lord. You should worship God, whether you're in the valley or you're on the mountaintop. We sang that first song, You Lift My Burden and I'll Rise. You lift my burden and I'll rise. But you know what? We got to show God, I know you can lift my burden. My Redeemer lives. You live inside of me so I can worship you and I can praise you. Guys, there is a spirit man living inside of you that wants to worship. There is not ever a time where you walk in these doors and your spirit man says, just not today. I'm just not feeling. You just sit here. No, because you know what? Then who wins? Satan. If Satan can stop your praise, he'll get a victory. I want to tell you guys a story. I'm going to close. We're going to do communion. There's a song that's been on my heart all week, besides here again, and it's called Raise a Hallelujah. And this song, maybe some of you have heard it, maybe haven't, it's Bethel Music. They just came out with a new album. And this, I don't know, I don't remember if I told you guys this story or not, but there was a young boy, I think we prayed for him, if I'm not mistaken. I believe he was 2 at the time. What's his name? Jackson. And, I mean, he was going to die. I mean, there was no other explanation. He was extremely sick, and these people were affiliated with Bethel Church. And they were calling prayer warriors, they were posting all about it online. I think we prayed for him. We prayed for this little boy. And this guy, this worship leader, said, they texted him and they said, he's not going to make it through the night. He's not going to make it. The doctors are saying there's no way. He's not going to make it. And he said all of a sudden this fear, just this unbelief just came over him. And he said, I opened my mouth. And this is what came out. I'll raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I'll raise a hallelujah louder than my unbelief. And he wrote this song. But it's about raising your voice in praise. It's about raising your voice in hallelujah, even when you're scared to death and you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Even when you have no money left and you don't know how you're going to put food on the table for your kids. When your marriage is falling apart and you don't know what else to do. And when your prodigal is still running away as far as possible. And they haven't shown any signs of wanting to turn around. I'll raise a hallelujah. Don't let Satan steal your praise. If you can praise him on the mountain, then praise him in the valley. He's the same God who does the same things. And this story was on Fox News. I mean, this kid is a miracle, a walking miracle. It was on our news, Fox News. But literally, this guy said he opened his mouth, and this song just started pouring out. Don't let Satan steal your praise. You got to keep singing. You got to keep shouting hallelujah. You got to keep saying the name of Jesus, even if you can't say anything else. Say Jesus. Say Jesus. Because what does it say? The enemy trembles at the name of Jesus. And so I don't care what's going on in your life. You keep proclaiming the name of Jesus, the Most High, because he's good. He is so good. He is so good. And so this morning, that's for somebody Hallelujah. I'm going to raise a thank you, Jesus. I'm going to proclaim the name of Jesus. I'm going to tell Satan how powerful my Jesus is and that nothing can stand against him. And that his love for me is unstoppable. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Oh, Jesus. Just go to prayer with me. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. You're here today. You're here today. And you're looking for the hearts that are completely yours. You're looking for the hearts that are saying, here I am, Jesus. I'm dead and I'm dry, but you can bring me to life today. You're looking for the ones that are willing to say, Jesus, here I am. Do what you want with me. Wherever you want me to go, I'll go. Lead me into a valley if that's where you want to take me. All I want is all you are, Jesus. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We love you, Jesus. And we love you, Jesus. We love you, Jesus, and we're so thankful to be in your house today. Thankful to be in your house today. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. I'm gonna hear my praises roar up from the ashes. Hope will arise. Death is defeated and the King is alive. I'll raise a hallelujah. I just feel like I'm supposed to sing this over you today. In the presence of my enemy, I'll raise a hallelujah. Louder than my unbelief, I'll raise a hallelujah. And I will watch the darkness flee. And I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. You're gonna hear my praises roar up from the ashes. Hope will arise. Death is defeated. The King is alive. He's calling to you today. Are you going to rise? Are you going to walk? Are you going to stand? Are you going to praise? Are you going to worship God in the valley and the mountaintops? I love you, Jesus. And I thank you. I thank you for your power and your presence in this place today. Thank you for spiritual awakening. And I thank you for the valleys. Because those could be the most intimate times with you. Because we have nowhere else to go.